Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Well, it is that time of the year, the monsoon rolling in, our energy demand is high, the grid gets somewhat strained at times, and it can result in outages. I mean, we turn on that light switch or the air conditioner and we expect power. We demand it. And if we don't get it, we're not happy. Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. I'm John Hook, and joining us this week is Jeff Burke. He's the APS Director of Resource Planning. We're going to talk about kind of what is a mystery of our energy grid, because people really don't know. I don't, how it all works. We turn on the switch and we expect it to be there. Thank you for being here, by the way.
Thank you for having me.
Good to see you. In terms of the summertime, just give me a comparison. How much stress is on the system in July versus March?
Well, we see loads that are more than twice as high in the summertime.
Twice?
Right, as we do in the non-summer months. And that's driven by air conditioning load primarily. We all know it's hot out there. You know, we're going to see temperatures in excess potentially of 115 degrees for several days next week. But APS plans for that in the summertime. But just to put in perspective, the usage on the grid in the summertime is about, last year we approached 7,400 megawatts.
So what does that mean?
And that's enough power to serve all of our customers, which is about 1.2 million customers.
1.2 million customers.
That's right.
How many people are we talking
That's
about?
2.7 million people. And we cover a large portion of Arizona, central Arizona, as far in northern Arizona, Flagstaff area, Yuma area, across the state.
And TEP's got kind of the southern half.
Some of the southern. And then you also have SRP.
SRP, yes. Right. Do SRP and APS work in conjunction with each other on anything?
We do have some combined projects as far as transmission. There's partial owners. We participate in plants together. Some of our existing generation facilities, we participate together. But when we get to the real-time operations, it's really a collaboration of everybody in the area. The grid is resilient, but we have lots of players on the grid, and they all work together in concert to make sure that the power stays on in these extreme conditions.
I wanted to show video of, you had some huge power poles go down. I had not seen this. I don't think I'd ever seen it. The big metal ones going down.
That's right.
In a storm. There you go. That is a remarkable picture. What kind of winds would it take to do this?
Well, we saw winds that oftentimes can be in excess of 100 miles per hour.
And this was where, again? This was...
This was, I don't know exactly where that photo was, but what happens...
Southeast Valley?
Yeah,
okay.
But what happens, I don't know exactly what poles they were, but
okay.
What happens is we get these storms and we get extreme winds really rapidly, and you can see the damage that's done there. And what we do is we have crews that go out there, and it could be in the middle of the night, and they go out there and they fix it, and they make sure that your power's back as rapidly and as safely as possible.
Is there a backup for something like that happening? Is there any way to kind of reroute the power and get it and do an end run around it when that kind of thing happens?
Oftentimes we'll switch to a different circuit if it's available. Again, it depends on what size the line is and where it's located. But we do a couple of different things. If it's available, we'll move the power from a different direction. If it's not available, then we have crews out there to fix it as rapidly as we can. The
wooden poles we see around, every time one of those goes down, you're trying to replace them with a metal pole now that's more sturdy? Is that kind of the idea, or no?
Oftentimes. It depends on where and how big the line is. It also depends on its exposure. We're also doing a lot of work with undergrounding for reasons like that.
I was going to ask you about that. I was going to ask you about that, Jeff, because people wonder, around neighborhoods particularly, well, why can't they bury these? It's really expensive, right?
It's expensive, right? And so there's a couple of different trade-offs. You lose access to it, but there's some reliability to be gained for that, for purposes like what you just saw. But it is expensive. And so what we try to do is balance that trade-off of cost, reliability, and our ability to replace those poles in a rapid fashion. We want to make sure that we can maintain reliable service, but it's got to be affordable too.
Right, and so above ground, it's actually in some ways easier to get to and identify the problem quicker?
That's correct. because you can actually see what you're doing, and you don't have to access it underground.
My understanding is if you do it underground, and some of it is done that way, the insulation of that it's an enormous project to try to keep these lines insulated, right?
It is, but at the same time, they're somewhat protected from the environment
Right.
in the same fashion.
Okay, so what are the dangers to these lines aside from winds? I'm hearing a lot of stuff about distracted drivers knocking over poles.
Yeah, and I would encourage folks to, really think about before you text and drive. Those are the kind of things we think that's a large reason why drivers are becoming distracted. Make sure you keep your hands on the wheel.
You've seen an uptick in this, right?
Yes, we have. And so cars hitting poles are on the rise. And it's not just the person that hits the pole that is in a hardship because of it. It knocks power out to our customers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would like to see folks, just be safe. Is it that important to text at that point in time?
That's a good lesson for everybody.
Or can you wait for a few
Everybody.
minutes? Yeah.
Quick question about California versus Arizona.
Sure.
I have been out there so many times when they've had power outages, big ones.
Right.
Why are we we seem to not have this on a scale that California has. Why is that?
Well, we have a pretty rigorous planning process. We look out years in advance and make sure that we have the correct resources, and we're prepared for the type of both storms and heat that we're going to see. So we file planning documents with our commission, and we make sure that we're able to meet those loads in a reliable fashion. Again, reliability, affordability is really important to us. You can't live in the desert if you don't have electricity.
What is our breakdown right now in terms of power and where it comes from? How much of it is from Palo Verde Nuclear Generating Station? How much of it is from coal? Is there any hydro for you guys, or is that only SRP?
So our power mix right now, it's about 50% clean. And that's made up of about 25% nuclear, about 12 to 13% of both renewables and demand-side management programs. That's energy efficiency and DR programs. And then the remaining portions are made up of coal and natural gas.
Coal and natural gas.
That's right.
Where would we be without Palo Verde?
Well, it's a really unique asset. It is the largest carbon-free producing generation unit in the U.S. And so it is, it's one of those resources that produces 24/7, 365 days a year. And it doesn't produce any carbon emissions. So we would be in a very different place as far as our resource mix goes.
All you get is steam.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
all you get out of there, right?
Right.
Pretty much.
Right.
And then spent fuel rods you got to deal with. But
That's right. But it's really important when we think about the environment and the CO2 emissions and a variety of emissions in Arizona. It helps us keep those down, and it helps our resource mix stay clean.
Speaking of spent rods, when you put them in a cooling pond, that goes on for years, right? And then eventually they're taken, is it to Nevada? Is that?
No, they're actually stored outside of the facility in casks. They're stored in large concrete blocks, if you will.
Bunkers?
Above ground.
Above ground.
But they're very safe, and they could sit there for quite some time, and they have sat there for quite some time.
Is Palo Verde good to go, meeting your guys' needs into the future? Because there's always been kind of on some of these plants that some thought would be finished by now, they've been retrofitted, upgraded, and the lifespan has increased amazingly across the country for these plants.
So with Palo Verde, it is licensed to operate until the late 2040s. It's also eligible for a 20-year life extension. So it's constantly producing energy. It's got high capacity factor. It operates well. And so it's a type of resource that we want to see around as long as we can.
Are we selling a lot of that power across the West?
Well, so there's co-owners in Palo Verde. We own 29, just a little bit above 29% of it. And so there are other members in the West.
California gets some.
They get some. There's a couple of owners in California. And so it does make its way all throughout the West.
Do you see, with the growth of the desert Southwest, we're approaching, I think, 7 million people now. We may be there, actually. I haven't checked in the last few months. Is there any discussion? They're wickedly expensive. We're talking about billions, hundreds of billions. Would we be able to kind of project down the line that we might need another nuclear plant? And this might be the place to put it, because we're not on a fault line. We're not really part of a fault system. We don't have huge natural disasters here. Sometimes I wonder, is the desert Southwest due for another plant at some point?
Well, so when we think about nuclear energy, there's been some discussion about moving to more small modular reactors, so you could add them on an incremental basis. One of the things about nuclear plants are their baseload facilities. And to add additional nuclear at this point in time, we would want to make sure that we would be able to ramp it up and down. And what that means is essentially turn it from a low output level to a high output level on a regular basis.
And you don't have that luxury of Palo Verde. It's either kind of running or it's not.
That's what it was designed for.
Right. So with that in mind, let's do a quick touch on solar, because Randy Eddington, who used to run the Palo Verde plant, he's a friend. We talked a lot about this and about when it came to solar. He was kind of lamenting that when Palo Verde's up and running, it's cranking out, maximum power all the time. And he said, some of this stuff, the solar stuff, when we've got the power we need out of Palo Verde, he said it didn't make sense.
Well, so we are moving towards a cleaner energy mix. And Arizona is blessed to have a significant amount of sun. We're one of the highest sun producers. What APS has tried to do is take an approach that adds solar in a reasonable fashion. Here's what happens. Think about the weather conditions. Think about the annual weather conditions. So in the summertime, we use a lot of power. Mm-hmm. It's hot out, we have high air conditioning loads. In the wintertime, it's nice out. And so we're about 90% residential customers. And think about your house. When it's the non-summer months, you don't use heating, you don't use air conditioning. Okay. So from the power company perspective, our loads are low. So now we talk about, let's bring Palo Verde back. It's designed to operate at a high
right.
level.
It's cranking.
And
right.
solar's designed to come on in the middle of the day and produce at full output. Well, that's when we don't have high loads. And so without,
you don't need it.
Without those high loads, we have a conflict between the two resources. And so from a reliability perspective, Palo Verde is there to produce when we need it. In the summer, when the sun goes down, mm-hmm. when people want to run their air conditioners. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was looking at the temperatures when we had the last heat wave. It was 100 degrees at midnight. And right. so you're not getting carbon-free power production from anything but solar, but Palo Verde at
right.
that point.
Right. So the question is then, these subsidies that homeowners have been getting, does it make sense?
Well, so we went through a process to address that, and we're working on that. At the commission, we had a value of solar hearing. And that value of solar hearing, what it does is it gradually steps down what a customer can get for rooftop solar. Mm-hmm. And so the idea would be that we want to make sure that we're not encouraging resources that are more expensive. Because keep in mind, rooftop solar is 3 to 4 times more expensive than utility scale solar. And so we have to take the perspective of customer affordability.
Yeah, what makes sense
Correct.
Economically.
Right.
Do the economics of solar make sense?
Well, it depends. It depends on, so Arizona is unique. We were a first mover from a solar perspective. I told you about our unique circumstances mm-hmm. with the way we use energy and our customer base uses energy.
Right.
And so oftentimes you hear about how inexpensive it is. But the challenge is, it can be inexpensive, but if people can't use it, then it's not worth a lot. And so that's kind of the crutch. So we're doing a lot of things to address that, though. We've added batteries to our system. We signed a deal with First Solar, which is a battery plus solar facility. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we have resources that meet our customers' needs, but at the same time, we can integrate those types of resources.
Okay. As we read today, APS parent company was trying to block a renewable energy ballot measure. This may be something you can't talk about. I don't know about your expertise on this, but there is a push to try to go for more of this stuff. And the question is, does it make sense?
Well, I can tell you from the analysis perspective, we look at does it make sense. From the ballot initiative perspective and all the things that are in the headlines on that, that's not really what I do.
Okay.
But from the initiative perspective, what it does is it forces us to use only renewables on our system. And
50%.
And add them rapidly.
Right.
And so what does that mean? It means that once solar is generally going to be the most added resource. But when we think about, we talked about what are our loads like in the middle of the day in the non-summer months? They're going to be in the 4,000 to 5,000 range, megawatts, okay? But with this program, we're going to see up to 8,000 megawatts of renewables on our system. And so what happens there is too much energy on the system.
Can you sell it somewhere else?
Well, that's the challenge. And so when we think about, we've heard folks say, well, sell it to California. Right now, today, California is sending us negatively priced power in the non-summer months in the middle of the day.
Because they have too much.
When solar's producing. And
that is amazing. This is the thing that doesn't get discussed.
Right.
When we start talking about solar, I think people feel good about it. They say it makes sense in the desert. But the question is how it's used on the grid.
Right. Well, and this has big implications. If you add that much, that challenges all the baseload resources and the energy mix that we just talked about. So we need to retire coal plants early. We need to retire Palo Verde early because you can't keep producing energy and selling it at negative prices to other areas, paying people to take energy.
Right. They're on me to take a break. We're going to take a break, and we're with Jeff Burke, APS Director of Resource Planning. Interesting discussion about our power, where it comes from, how we get it, what you pay for it. We'll continue to talk about it on Newsmaker Sunday. Back right after this. You flip the switch on in your house or you turn on your air conditioner, you expect it's going to come on, and almost always it does. There are days that we're stressed here in Arizona. We're talking to Jeff Burke, APS Director of Resource Planning. Biggest day we've ever had for power.
That was last year. We hit nearly 7,400 megawatts on our system. And so that
74 megawatts.
7,400
megawatts.
Megawatts. And that's enough to serve 1.2 million customers.
Okay, now 7,400 megawatts. What would that be versus an average day in Arizona over the whole year?
Well, it depends because you have your seasonal differences.
Sure.
But if you think about a non-summer month, you might be somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 megawatts on the peak. In the middle of the day, you'll be significantly less.
And we're at 7,400?
That's right.
On the big...
Yeah. And so...
and your job is to plan ahead and make sure we can handle that, right?
That's right. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what we need years in advance. We make sure that we have enough resources for these types of situations. And then after we've planned for them, we give them to our operations folks. And our operations folks use them to meet this peak.
Rolling blackouts that we've seen in California, is that anything that we would eventually see here?
We never want to see rolling blackouts.
What does that tell you? If you see rolling blackouts in California, what does that tell you about their grid?
Well, it just says that there's a lot of stress on the grid, and I don't have the details about what the stress was. Generally, it can be heat related, but you have a lot of electrical equipment, and electrical equipment gets stressed when it's hot out. But what we make sure we do is, as soon as the summer's over, we start planning for the next summer. That's when we really need to make sure that we have a reliable system. And we've got all kinds of different planning groups that go about, are the poles ready? Are the lines ready? Are all the transformers good? We have linemen out there today and during all the heat events. So I would like to recognize them. They have a tough job.
Oh yeah, and they're right on the spot immediately when something happens.
And so they get called and they go out there and they put it back together as quickly as they can, so you can make sure that your air conditioner is still running.
We've got a big heat wave coming next week. Is this going to be kind of the critical time of the summer for us? Do you think this is kind of where you say, if we get through this, we're probably good?
This is usually the temperatures that we see during a peak. They're usually approached 115 or more. Last year we saw 118 and 119. It was in June, so the humidity was a little bit lower. But this is what, the other thing that you'll notice is that we'll have several days of heat. And so that creates stress on the grid.
Do overnight lows that are 100, is that another component to this? In other words, in June, we can hit really high temperatures and the overnight low cools off.
That's right.
Because dew point's down, humidity's down. But right now, the overnight lows are soaring.
They are. And so we'll see several days in a row where the temperatures will never get below 90. And so you know what that means at your house. It means your air conditioner is running around the clock.
Right.
And so our folks are out all the time. They're both manning the trade floor, which is where they monitor the system conditions, the temperatures, the resources. At the ECC, that's where they actually dispatch the resources and make sure all the lines are, everything is, nothing's overloaded. And then all the way out to the linemen who are, out there troubleshooting and making sure that the power stays on.
Quick point before we take a break. Water use in Arizona has actually, this is remarkable. We reached our peak of water use in Arizona. Think about the growth that's happened since the mid-'80s. Peak water use was in the mid-'80s in Arizona, despite the explosive growth of people we've had. Part of that's a trade-off of ag, which uses a ton of water, for residential. What I'm getting to is a point about efficiency, energy efficiency. Have we seen, even though we've had explosive growth, with more energy efficient cooling and residents using newer gear, have you seen this same kind of thing?
We have. We've seen, we have one of the strongest energy efficiency programs in the nation, and so we have definitely seen impacts of that. But the offset is we are a fast-growing region. We're the fastest metro area growing. I believe we are either the top or the second. And so when you think about how many people are coming here, it's a good thing because it reflects on the business environment, the climate, the opportunities that exist here. So it's a good thing that, that people want to be here.
Yeah, it's a balancing act. We're going to finish up. When we come back, we're going to talk to Jeff Burke about whether we are ready long-term planning for this kind of growth. Back in a minute with Jeff Burke from APS. Jeff Burke, APS Director of Resource Planning. He's the guy who looks out in the future, he and his team, to figure out what we need going forward. And in Arizona, we've been really lucky. I mean, I brought it up earlier in the program. Out in California, these rolling blackouts have become not an uncommon thing. It's happening a lot. We haven't had that. Why is that?
Well, we have a number of planning functions. My group is one of the ones that looks at the future. We say, okay, what do we look like today? What do we think we're going to need for the future based on how our customers use electricity? And then we say these are the type of resources that make sense for our customers from both a reliability and a cost perspective.
I'm guessing in 15 years we're close to 10 million people. Is that what you guys are looking at?
I think from our perspective, we had nearly 500,000 new customers in our forecast. And so that if you put it in perspective, 1.2 million today, it's another 500,000 customers on top of that we would have to provide.
So we've got about 30 seconds left. Are we ready?
We are. And we are constantly working through that.
You very confidently say that.
We are constantly working through that plan and making sure that we have enough resources to provide reliable service. Okay,
Jeff Burke, we appreciate you coming on from APS. And stay cool out there. It's going to be a hot one next week. We'll see you on Newsmaker Sunday. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.